All right, Auburn, number 15, Vandy. Vandy's a 6.5-point favorite. The over-under I have is 3 reminders of the Diego Pavia, Hugh Freeze history that we were robbed of because Hugh Freeze couldn't beat Kentucky. Don't cry because it's over. Be happy that it happened. It's a shame. It's a shame.
I mean, I don't know if we should be happy that, to be honest, it feels like we wasted a lot of time watching Auburn.
Well, it was time well spent watching Hugh Freeze and Diego Pavia. I don't regret that for a second. And maybe that's easier for me as someone who doesn't have a dog in the fight and can just watch this play out. But you know me, like I have for a very long time argued against the phrase college football is better when team X is good. I hate that. Can't stand it. It is just such a lazy way of saying the sport is more familiar to me. And I like when, I know who the good teams are. I don't like it when people come up with that take. Okay. Even if it's well-intentioned, to me, like there's a better way to say, oh yeah, like, okay, so college football is only good when Nebraska is good. So you haven't liked college football in 30 years. All right. Congratulations. That's weird. Maybe you should watch something else. But college football was funnier when Diego Pavia and Hugh Freeze were meeting on an annual basis. I stand by that. I will definitely say that. Not getting it tattooed, but I will stand by that.
College football is much funnier when Auburn's good. I think that's just a fair statement. I think that Auburn has had some of the funniest wins I have ever seen in my entire life, and some of the funniest losses when they're good. But when they're bad, it's not as funny. It's just kind of sad. I actually believe Auburn is about the only team that I want them to be good for the sake of the sport, because when they're good, it's so funny because they find a way to both win and lose games. It's awesome.
It is. Truly. Yeah. 2013 Auburn will live on as one of the funniest teams that the college football has ever seen. And not for fans that were on the wrong end of those losses, but for everybody else, just like throwing your hands up going, well, this is just inexplicable. This can't keep happening. But Will, I do feel like we are moving to a different era, and it's a shame. Never rule out the idea of Diego Pavia and Hugh Freeze, one day meeting again, probably on a golf course. Who are we kidding? But, I do wonder somewhere as he approaches his 14th tee on his 5th round of golf of the day, if Hugh Freeze thought to himself, man, look at this. Look at out here. It's a beautiful day. Playing some golf. This beats game planning for Diego Pavia. He's had that thought this week many a time, okay? He's got to at least be a tiny bit relieved that he's not going to go 0-4 against him, because people like us would have reminded him of that at every possible turn. Will DJ Durkin go 1-0 against Diego Pavia? That's a different question.
See, DJ Durkin being a head coach is also kind of funny. Like, how did we end up here, man? How?
There are always questions when. Do we want to get into this?
We've already done it. Like, you're right. And I'll say this though. Here's another funny thing. So you're right. I would argue every time Hugh Freeze is on the golf course, he's thinking this is better than game planning about Diego Pavia. Second, I'm going to say something that Auburn fans, you stuck with us throughout. We actually kind of believed in Hugh Freeze more than most. Would it be fair to say, Connor, that Diego Pavia is the exact quarterback that Hugh Freeze hoped he was getting in Jackson Arnold?
Jackson Arnold's taller.
He's got those pro traits, man. You got to believe.
Yeah, it's so difficult because Diego Pavia, I'm not really talking about like his next level evaluation, but the scouting report on him is that scheme is just on his side in ways that Jackson Arnold doesn't ever look like he played with a scheme that was on his side. So maybe with the exception of like 2023 with Jeff Lebby, that's the only type of sample size that we have when it seemed like he was working well within the scheme. And he still was a flawed quarterback at that point as a true freshman and struggled with the mistakes. But I don't know if that's necessarily the case, because depending on who you believe, from that John Talty story about Tommy Tuberville saying that he told Hugh Freeze to recruit Diego Pavia out of the portal, I don't know that Hugh Freeze looked at Diego Pavia and thought, that's that's the vision. That's the model for a quarterback. And I'm getting a more talented version of that with Jackson Arnold. I don't know that that's the way that he approached that.
I think just to put a bow on that point, you're so right where it comes down to scheme. Whereas that, what you can do with Diego Pavia, yeah, I think it's the leadership and kind of that dog in him that you can't quantify. So I don't want to take that out. But that just goes to show when there's alignment, when a quarterback, an OC, a head coach are on the same page, you can have Diego Pavia. Good point.
Yeah. And Diego Pavia last year struggled against Auburn. Really struggled in a winning effort. This was a game in which he didn't look particularly healthy, but Vandy's offense was held to 227 yards. DJ Durkin's unit did its job. And I saw this stat from the Barn podcast covering all things Auburn. The only 3 teams in America who haven't allowed more than 24 points in a game this year are Ohio State, Indiana, and Auburn. To recap, the top 2 teams in America, and then the team that's 1-5 in SEC play.
Not only the 2 teams in America, the 2 top teams in America, 2 Big Ten teams that have played not great schedules that we always joke about, and a team that has played like Marcel Reed and like all these big time teams and limited them. And yet the offensive side of the ball, which Hugh Freeze we've taken all these risks to hire him. That's what stopped them.
It's baffling. Truly baffling. We'll get to more Hugh Freeze discussion with Ryan Brown in a bit here, but golly, do I have some thoughts on that. Vandy is unbeaten at home this year with a pair of wins against top 15 teams. Since the start of last year, when the New Mexico State importation began, 3 home losses, but all of them were to teams that won at least 9 games in the regular season: Texas, South Carolina, Tennessee. Auburn hasn't beat a ranked team in a true road game in 4 years. I don't think this is where that streak ends. And while it is tempting for me to say the ultimate irony would be Hugh Freeze getting fired, and then the very next game, finally Diego Pavia goes down at the hands of Auburn, that would be just so rich, that irony. Always beware of the interim coach energy, especially when it's coming from a guy who, DJ Durkin, does have that power conference head coaching experience. I think that keeps it close. And his defensive game plan, seeing that play out last year, seeing the success that it had against a Vandy offense that kind of quietly has struggled the vast majority of these last 2 games. Now, the final number against Texas isn't going to necessarily indicate that. We can get into stats about like success rate and stuff like that probably would tell a different story of what Vandy did the last 2 games. But I do think it's a 21-17 Vandy win in which we're reminded that Diego Pavia still has Auburn's number.
Yeah, and I love that final score. Honestly, I think not being, reactionary on either side of this, because these are 2 basically take the defenses out of it, because they both had solid defenses, and to the point, like Auburn probably is at this point had the better defense over the course of the year when you factor in how unbalanced they've been and how difficult it is to stay focused on defense and not you're one big play away at all times from losing a game if you're Auburn. And they've found a way to, they've lost some games, but it hasn't been because of defense. And so I say that to say both of these offensive styles that we've seen so far have been able to shorten the game, right? That's a big part of the reason too why Auburn has that the 24-point stat is accurate, because they have had fewer passing attempts. They have had fewer incompletions to a degree, right? But it's keeping the clock running, something that Diego Pavia and Vandy are really known for doing. But yeah, I do believe this is going to be a kind of grinded out game for both sides. I like that Auburn has tried this new thing called an offensive coordinator. I think it's going to help them out a lot. I think having a dude who calls plays who then
do tell.
Yeah, like so with this guy that calls plays and then he tells your quarterback like, hey, you run like trips left, like like you run the play and then you do it again the next play. And it could be a run.
But wait. What down is that? Is that first down? Is that second down? Third down? Like what's the plan changes?
It's every down but fourth. And sometimes on fourth too. That's the thing, because you can do that. So first down, second down could be run pass, and it could be the same guy, and then that way he knows he has momentum. And I think that's going to help Auburn's offense a lot. I'm going to be honest with you. And so that being said, like it seems like they've got the quarterback kind of figured out a little bit, right?
Do they?
Well, they've made a decision. That's the thing about Auburn. They've been unable to make decisions this year. At least they've made a bad decision is better than no decision. So that being said, they at least know what they have. They have the interim head coach energy. So point being, I don't think this is going to be a blowout, because it's a prideful Auburn defense and it's an offense that truly could not look worse. And so I still think Vandy's going to win, and I think they're going to control this game to a degree. But don't count out some chaos from interim DJ Durkin. And I mean, the funniest outcome, right, to your point, would be the players rallying around DJ Durkin and being forced to hire him, which I don't think is going to happen, but it would be funny.
The funniest outcome would be Auburn winning this 35-10 with Deuce Knight looking like a star. And he just comes in and balls out. And the two guys that Freeze recruited out of the portal are just on the sideline going, well, yeah, we're going to find somewhere else to play. Although I think Ashton Daniels is out of eligibility. Who knows who's actually out of eligibility?
Actually out of eligibility. Like, just bump into Pavia on the sideline. He's got some pointers. He's got a guy for that.
I would like to lead the Cam Coleman portal sweepstakes, or that's disrespectful to Auburn. I don't want to assume that he's necessarily going to be on the move. We'll see who Auburn ultimately hires to replace Hugh Freeze, and that could have a very large impact on it. But the Cam Coleman is getting a raise no matter where he goes. We could probably do an entire segment about this, but the teams that have already fired their head coaches who have really attractive receivers that are going to be coveted, big time guys like a Dallas Wilson at Florida, who's out for the year. He played 3 games, and I'm still looking at that guy going, buddy, I would be backing up the Brinks truck to get a guy like him and Cam Coleman. And again, for fan bases that are taking this as I'm saying he's gone. No. I'm not necessarily saying he's gone. But once that 30-day window opens up, you are sitting there on pins and needles going, this is a possibility. Okay. It just is. And there are a lot of those guys right now that when you look at these rosters that you go, man, they could make a team better, and they're going to be really, really attractive. And for a lot of teams across college football, that could be the difference in making college football playoff. And Cam Coleman, gosh, I hope better days are ahead for that guy. I did my dudes who deserve better team to no surprise whatsoever. I just did the Auburn defensive front 7 because their secondaries had some issues this year. If you kind of look at some of those numbers as well, when they don't get home, they kind of struggle defending the pass. But it was Cam Coleman, and then a lot of other guys like that. And I just broke down all the things that the Auburn front 7 has done so well. Auburn needs to get off this list because the 4 years that I've been doing that, Auburn's had the most representation of anybody. That's a problem.
Yeah, and especially with the resources they've invested. Like, Auburn loves football, right? And like, it's been fundamentally a football school for my entire life. Granted, Bruce Pearl's done some great things. He's no longer there, so they have the ability to transition back into a football school. And so that being said, like, I don't want to dump on Auburn too hard because I feel like we've been nicer to Auburn than probably most people. I don't want people to give us 1-star reviews and be like, you're laughing at Auburn. It's like, no, we just kind of expected better, as we have for kind of our whole careers here. And so that being said, I think it is a neutral take to say Cam Coleman deserves better. Be that staying at Auburn and getting a raise and a new offensive coordinator, that's fine. But what he's getting this year is not becoming of a person with his skill set. And like, usually on teams like that, you'll hear guys say, or fans say, oh, well, you don't know about this story. You don't know about he is in practice. I don't care. Like, I've seen what he does at games, and that some of that just goes to show, like, there's a reason why guys line up to go play for like the big brands, unfortunately, right? With the Ohio States, the Bamas, back OU used to be like this, where it's like you can expect a level of like things running on time. Like, you can just expect that the team is going to go a certain way. That's why it was so weird when things went south in Oklahoma with the Spencer Rattler situation, because it was like, dude, for 20 years, this place has been automatic. Yeah, they would lose a weird game, but your quarterback would be in the Heisman. You guys would be all conference. You guys would get drafted. And so when you take kind of a risk, which is what Cam Coleman did to go trust Hugh Freeze, you want to see that boldness pay off for a guy, kind of regardless, because we don't want guys lined up to go play for 4 different teams. We want players who have the courage to say, hey, maybe I'll stay at Auburn and trust this new guy, but it can't be this. It can't be what we've seen out of Cam Coleman so far,
I know that Nico is the one that gets the most attention for this, of the man looking back at the team that he left and, ends up in a worse situation. And he's kind of the poster child for this. And obviously, like, Tennessee suffering that 3rd loss probably changes that conversation. It'd be different if Joey Aguilar was leading them to Atlanta or leading them to another playoff berth or something like that. So it's not as extreme of an example as what we thought, especially with Nico doing better things at UCLA. But Eric Singleton's got to be part of that conversation too, man. Seeing what Georgia Tech has done this year and watching the offense that he's had to play in, albeit banged up a little bit, that's got to be a huge bummer to know that this has played out the way that it has. And you could have been, in lockstep with Haynes King, who he had a really good rapport with. He had that 2-year rapport with. And I understand people are like, well, that he made the bed. That's the bed he made. You got to lie in it. But man, that's got to be another one of those those situations, it's just tough to look back on.
Yeah,
so.
and I'll say really quick, like there's a level of like jokes that I'm able to tell about like an A&M or an Auburn that I'm never gonna tell for like Mississippi State or Mizzou, because it's like fundamentally Auburn, you're gonna be able to get those guys to come choose you forever, because you guys are locked in, you have the donor base. Guys are gonna keep making the decision to go play for Auburn. Now, if that turns into be a good decision or a bad decision, that's totally up to you guys. But Auburn's problems are Auburn. It's not people love the play-ins, people love the program, they love the uniforms, they love the history. So just give them something to enjoy versus going, man, I wish I was at Tech.
Yeah, can't have that.